Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's been an enjoyable week here. Some very good conversation, some great new ideas that have been shared, and I'm hoping to end the week with some very controversial material. I'm going to try to leave about 15 minutes at the end. I'm hoping I create enough of a firestorm that I'll get some scathing criticism and questions. So with that said, story of ox carts and airplanes. And I use this as a metaphor for the topics I'm going to be talking about. And it's about the promise of e-learning, the promise of distance learning unfulfilled. And I use this metaphor because these show two drastically different modes of transportation, but they also illustrate how far away we are from the way we serve our learners and where we could possibly be in the future. Before I get into the presentation itself, I want to talk a little bit about the future of e-learning by Henry Block. Does anyone in here know who Henry Block is? Excellent. Henry Block says, e-learning is a market characterized by consistent double-digit growth. It provides a means to reach new groups of previously underserved learners and can leverage new technologies to increase learning outcomes. Sound pretty familiar with everything we've heard this week? Okay. Henry Block actually said this in 1999 when he wrote a report for Montgomery Securities Bank of America talking about the promise of e-learning. Everything that we're talking about today, Henry Block already said in 1999 about the power of reaching the underserved markets, of catalyzing what we could do. However, nobody ever read this. It was just circulated mainly in the corporate sector. You cannot even go online and Google and find a copy of this. It's called the E-Bang theory that he published for Montgomery Securities. The only place it exists is in a written binder, which I have at home, and it's a report about this thick that talks about in great and painful detail how new technologies can be leveraged to help us reach out, expand our focus, serve students who've never been served before. However, the hype exceeded the ability to implement. Anyone who was around in 1999 knows putting courses online at that time was not an easy proposition. There were still a lot of limitations. But the thing is, those limitations just have a different name today. We're still dealing with the same promise, but a whole new set of realities. And I want to start with, I'm going to cover 4 topics today, and one has to, and they will go from least controversial to most controversial, I hope. The first one is, about a year and a half ago, I was sitting in O'Hare Airport waiting to board a flight, and looking over the shoulder of this young lady beside me, looking at her computer screen, being very, very snoopy about what I was doing. And I saw she had Facebook open. And she was using an equation editor to cut and paste formula into this page that they developed, a group that had been developed in Facebook. I asked the young lady, "What are you doing?" She said, "Corresponding with some of my classmates, and we're doing our math homework, Algebra 1, college." I said, "Really?" I said, "Does your university have a LMS?" "Oh yeah, they have one, but there's nothing real in there. They suck." That's what she said. And she said, "Why would we want to go in there?" And if you think about it, learning management systems are far removed from the way contemporary learners access and act on information. Terry made a great point of this whenever he was talking about connectivism the other day. Matter of fact, he stole a little bit of my thunder, and I had to revise the slides I had on connectivism. Thanks, Terry. Whenever we look at the way students interact, it really has to do with the limitations that the institution imposes on them. Now, institutions are terrified that students are going to get misinformation. They say privacy can't be assured, and this comes from every IT person you will ever meet. For the most part, they say we have to put everything behind a firewall, box it off, and make sure that our students can't get out of this nice little trap we've set for them. And they're also afraid that students might learn about the Pacific Northwest tree octopus. Anybody in here hear of that creature? started out in 1999. It was a myth that was photoshopped up with an octopus in a pine tree in the Pacific Northwest. And it spread out through email, and to the point that several scientists actually had to start issuing emails saying, this is a complete hoax, folks. Okay. But this has perpetuated itself, especially in the digital literacy field, to the point that academics have this bad habit of saying you can't trust anything that's out in the public domain because somebody could contrive information like this, and our students might actually get a hold of this and believe that something like this is true. Well, yeah, if you look at the self-correction time on Wikipedia, the self-correction time for inaccurate information is now about 37 minutes. And this has been done by some random testing of people inserting false information. The community comes back and self-corrects. My other point would be that if a student actually believes that there is a tree octopus, should they really be in university in the first place? Now, we look at what is the reality of this, and how much was this young lady right about there not being anything in there? This came off the Silicon Valley Insider about 5 months ago, and it shows how people are communicating and sharing. And it looks at sharing overall across every type of media that's out there. What's the number one? 24% of people today are communicating via Facebook. 11.1% are communicating via email. And you can see it on down through Twitter, Yahoo Bookmarks, MySpace, etc. The MySpace is, I saw an adaptation of this the other day. The MySpace share is actually shrinking some now. But we are ignoring the primary means of communication and sharing that our students are using in their daily lives. Now, I absolutely hate the word game changer. It has to be one of the most overused terms out there. But in this case, there is something that came about in October of 2010 that I think does meet that criteria. And it was the London School of Business and Finance put their MBA program on Facebook. I don't know how many of you all have seen that, but they actually took all of their course material and put it up there. And then then they developed discussion posts around the material. Anybody can access LSBF's portal through Facebook, through the application, review the materials, watch the experts from the university speak, discuss from peers throughout the world, and then if they want to sit for exams in the British tradition, they pay a fee. If not, they can just acquire the knowledge on their own and use it in whatever means they see fit. This is a big paradigm change for the way we're delivering education. It also has drastic implications. It is very high quality content. I went through it. What they have in there is very, very slick. It's not just the lectures. It's simulations, it's case studies, it's questions that revolve around it. Now, in my opinion, if this model catches on, and by the way, there are 89,000 fans of this on Facebook as of 4 a.m. this morning, whenever I last checked, before I came here. So if this becomes the norm, we all have a lot of problems to think about in the future on how we deliver education and what our expectations are for students. I would say that one thing that's important, if we look at this from a pedagogical aspect, and talking again about Terry's point about connectivism, is if we think about this from a perspective of a practical inquiry model, you're starting with a triggering event, which is the content that they put out there, which LSBF puts on the web. And we're moving through exploration, integration, resolution. You can give these any names you want. There are tons of different models for this. Everybody knows progressing up Bloom's taxonomy, Gagne, etc. This is just one model I wanted to show. And at every point you can have a recursion back to a previous point. In the LSBF community, this is happening, and if you go through the posts, people from all over the world are introducing new information on their own to supplement the discussion that's out there, and you see this cyclical dynamic going on. So it's a model that really is working. Now, that's the end of my first topic. Let's get a little more controversial here. Pedagogy, first in e-learning. And a lot of the conventional wisdom has always been that you use a firm pedagogical foundation and then adapt the technology. I have always believed this since the very earliest days I've been involved in e-learning. And I put the comic book up here, which I have been told doesn't get much, has not had much exposure down here. But it serves a point because I couldn't even find the icons for what I was looking for. Archie and Veronica. Who in this room knows those names outside of the comic book context? Rory did earlier. I knew I talked to him about it. So we have one other person in the back. Archie and Veronica were actually the first semblance of a web browser that was out on the market that came out after the bulletin board service. It was the first time that we were able to actually wrap graphics and text, followed fairly shortly by Netscape. Archie and Veronica were a nightmare. I was in on a project in 1992 where we created a website for delivering education to public school teachers. It took over 200 hours to develop the resources for 7 pages of content in it, in Archie and Veronica. However, in my opinion, that was the first big change. At that point, the technology did change the pedagogy. We had to rethink how we were teaching to work in this new medium. Since that point, I have always said that, yes, I agree, pedagogy really should not be altered by the technology because the changes have only been incremental. However, 2 things have hit within the last couple of years that have turned this on its head, and these are the 2 symbols for them. The little robot, it represents the Android 2.2 platform. The icon on the other side represents the Adobe Integrated Runtime. Now, why are these such a big deal? Even though I knew about them from inception and on air, I was actually on the alpha testing list. I didn't really fully understand what was going on until I talked to a gentleman on a flight to Singapore who was sitting beside me. And he said, I can go on my phone and I can access my credit card account. He said, I can access it on my computer. I can access it with my Google TV appliance. I can go on and I can bring down the New York Times in this reader. And I can access all the content offline, and I can complete the crossword puzzle offline. These are the result of both the implementation of the 2 technologies I've talked about. First, the Android 2.2. This is an instance where the world really did change overnight and nobody noticed. It provides a standard OS from devices from cell phones to flat panel TVs. You can have the same OS working on your cell phone, your tablet computer, or your tablet, your computer, and your TV set through the right appliance, either like a Google TV, a Blu-ray player. Different formats will let you access the web there. Build once, tweak, and deploy. And I put tweak in big capital letters because, as you'll see in a minute, tweaking is more than a necessity. Why this is such a change, why this represents such a dramatic change is we've always talked about ubiquity, anytime, anywhere access. And we've struggled with trying to figure out how to use mobile to do it. We've tried to figure out how to send students books, how to send them CD-ROMs, how they can interact with different media. Well, now it's here, folks. You can consume the same content on your cell phone, on your tablet, your PC, your TV. It's no longer talking about how to do it. And as a matter of fact, I would argue that it even makes the term mobile learning passé, because we are talking now about the open screen. We're talking about multi-screen. And this changes the way that people consume. You might be at the grocery and listening to content that has been produced in an audio format on your phone. Then you're hitting it later in the day at work on your computer, on your laptop. You might be setting about watching the children in the evening, accessing something on your tablet. Later, opening up your Google TV or through a Blu-ray player and accessing the same content on your TV. Well, why this is a train wreck in motion is, I want you to think about something for a minute. Think about accessing something on one of these. What's going to happen when you access that on a 52-inch flat panel TV? It's not going to be pretty. And likewise, accessing something that was developed for the flat panel TV on your mobile phone or on your smartphone is not going to be pretty. Well, sure, you can develop it for the computer in between, and then it doesn't satisfy anybody on either end. You have this whole issue of form factors. Even though you have a common platform, we have to think about how to create how to work with the form factors for all these different devices and how students consume. And these are what our learners are expecting to be able to do. They're expecting to be able to access in the same way on any of these devices that they do their credit card statement. And if they can't, they're asking us, why can't we do it? And this is a problem we better get on in a big hurry. I was in Beijing about 5 months ago. In the back of the taxi cabs in Beijing, they have a tablet in the back of the taxi cab that you can access, and you can go through a local directory of services that are available to you. You get to your hotel room, and through the browser on the TV, you can access the same information, and the form factors have changed to where it displays. The content is richer. They are nailing it in Beijing on this as a public service. And if we don't do the same thing for our students, we are going to miss out. And this is someplace where we better think about letting the technology drive instead of the pedagogy. Now, the second is the Adobe Integrated Runtime. There's a lot of, and whenever I'm putting a company's name up here, especially one that has a for-profit service, I know there's a lot of controversy involved with that, but I will tell you this, open educational resources are great, but they're only great insofar as they're the best solution. If you have a paid service that works better, is cheaper, and can deliver faster, you better use it. Sticking to an OER just for the sake of being open, what is the point? Because OER is free, but there's no such thing as free. Somewhere, somehow, someone has to pay, regardless of what you're using. What AIR is, and the Adobe Integrated Runtime, is probably one of the most powerful things that's ever hit the market. And by the way, the SDK for it's free. If you want to get the AIR SDK and the Flex SDK to build on, they're free. Tools that make it quicker, like Flex Builder, yes, you pay for them. But the Adobe Integrated Runtime allows you to take a server-based application and allow them to exist on the desktop. Now you're probably saying, so what? Okay. I want you to take a look at this. This is TweetDeck. How many people in here use TweetDeck or have seen it? Okay. What TweetDeck is basically doing is it's going out, and in each of these columns you see, it's hitting web services against Twitter, against Facebook, and it will now hit against some other media. There are some other applications out there, but I thought this might be the one that people would be most familiar with. And it ports them into an application that resides on your desktop. Now, you can have multiple, you're looking across multiple layers on here on what's going on Twitter, what's going on in certain discussions within it, what's going on Facebook. The implication is this doesn't just work with these services. You can mix, match, and select any web service that's out there, anything that resides on a server, and bring it in as a part of a native component of an app that resides on the desktop. Now, personal learning environments are all the rage. However, personal learning environments, as they have existed until now, have one big limitation. They're basically just a collection of icons on a web browser that you hit that'll take you to different places. This allows you to port the information in and make your own true environment out of it, where you're seeing everything in real time and you're able to add and subtract these columns at will with anything else. The implication is, while TweetDeck operates with connectivity to online, the other thing about the AIR, about the Adobe Integrated Runtime, is that it allows users that are offline to have interactive experiences. And I say with limited connectivity, there are still places where we're dealing with dial-up connectivity or worse. With AIR, you can take anything that exists, an entire multimedia environment, along with quizzes, along with, yes, discussion posts, if you can build it, that will integrate, bring the whole experience down to where it will operate and be an interface for the students without connectivity. And then when you reconnect, everything that's been done offline can be ported back to the server. That is huge, absolutely huge when you talk about underserved populations. You can also use Flex, which is a parallel framework with AIR that will allow you to have peer-to-peer connectivity. The practical implication is, say you have netbooks in an area where you might have 20 learners who don't have connectivity, okay, or have very limited connectivity. Those learners can interact with each other through the P2P connection and have a simulated online environment in the offline mode with the power of being able to leverage AIR to do it. New York Times reader, as I said, is a perfect example. You can do the crossword puzzle offline and check your answers when you go back on to see if you've done it right. Think about, while there are no educational apps that are public yet, I'll say that do the same thing, why can't you do it with an educational app? You can. And if people are consuming the New York Times there in that way, it's not going to be long before they think about, why can't I do this with my classroom? I will say that Adobe has also leveraged this, since they're the company that developed AIR, along with Connect. Connect, for any of you users on it, on the new version, has an offline client that you can take anything, a full presentation that's given in Connect, along with what you're saying to your students, assets that you may deploy out and allow them to download during the session, something that's developed in a quiz module on there through like the presenter interface that coincides with it. That can all be recorded and ported down with full functionality. It's not just a recording that the students are watching. They have full interactive functionality through the AIR client. If your university is using Connect, you can use that client, and it's absolutely free as long as you already have Connect in place. Our university, we're getting ready to try it out. We've developed about 80-some courses that we're getting ready to put out in the next month to try to see how this works on a limited beta group. We're very, very hopeful. The one thing it doesn't do is capture the round tripping of discussion forums and full non-multiple choice quiz questions. That, I know that there's a POC in the works on that some guys out of Atlanta are developing. They're going to venture capitalists right now to finish it off. They, hopefully, if they can hunt down about another $1.5 million, that thing's going to be on the market within a year. They'll allow everything that exists in an LMS to be ported to the offline client and pushed back. So they've already put about $1 million into it. They're looking at another $1.5 million, and that thing can be in market. That's not big money in the VC world, by the way, that we're talking about. Okay, analytics, getting a little more controversial going down the road. There's a lot of static around analytics right now, and a lot of it is rebranding of what we've already been doing. And my argument is that while we're talking about analytics and moving the discussion forward, we're not being visionary enough in the way we're thinking about what's going on. And because we're ignoring the realities of what's happening over in the corporate sector. And this comes from a good friend of mine. Some of you may have known him. I know he's been down here several times. Mark Milliron, who's a program officer with the Gates Foundation. One of Mark's big questions that he asked, if Amazon can, why can't we in education? If Amazon, how many of you in your emails get these annoying little emails every once in a while that say, based upon your recent purchase, you'll probably like this? Okay, exactly. And when you go online, if you're looking at a certain book, you'll say you probably like this. And it's gotten a little more complex now to where they're actually saying, well, if you're buying this song, you're probably going to like this kitchen mixer. Okay? It may sound funny, but think about it. When they show you those books, how many of them, how many books, how many DVDs, how many CDs, really, in the back of your mind, are you saying, yeah, that might be interesting? Based on focus groups, their hit rate is about 74% accuracy on profiling the Bayesian models that they're using against consumer preferences. Their conversion rate is over 50% on this. That is huge. So if 74% of the time you have something that's being delivered out to your student or being delivered out to a customer on a book, a DVD, the kitchen mixer that they may like, why can't we do that in education? That's why I say we aren't being visionary enough. And I agree, Mark loves to hammer this point, but I agree with him on it. Now, I'm going to try to play a movie here and hope we don't have a complete train wreck in the process.
If you were to stand at a road and the cars are whipping by, and all you can do is take a snapshot of the way the road looked 5 minutes ago, how would you know when to cross the road? 9 out of 10 organizations still make decisions this way every day, using out-of-date information. The organizations that are most competitive are going to be the ones that can make sense of what they learn as fast as they learn it. That's what I'm working on. I'm an IBMer. Let's build a smarter planet.
Okay. That's just a little clip from IBM. And the relevant part in there is using out-of-date information. If you're only looking at what happened 5 minutes ago, how do you know what's going to happen? And that's one of my criticisms of so much of the work that's going on with analytics, is it's all retrospective. It's saying, how are we looking at what already happened? We're not thinking enough about being predictive. When I make this argument, people say, well, the technology simply doesn't exist yet to do that. This is a dashboard that's pumped out at my university every 12 hours. It shows, and part of this is intentionally unreadable because there is student-sensitive data in here. What you see across the top is a listing of programs within the university that are at high, medium, and low risk in terms of the relative number of students who are likely to drop within the next 5 days. We have a 94% degree of accuracy in predicting student drops within the next 5 days within the model we've built. The column you see with red and yellow, that's actually an inline frame that can be scrolled through. We have 80,000 students at our university. Every 12 hours, it ranks all 80,000 students from 1 to 80,000 in the likelihood that they'll drop with a coefficient. You click on that individual student's name, it surveys 187 variables that we've cranked into the model that could display, but only the relevant ones to the reason that that student is likely to withdraw are shown. And then that information is passed out to the instructor, the advisor, etc. We do this every 12 hours. So as far as being able to predict not being able to be done, guess what, folks? It is. It's done. And this is our first step. The next thing we're playing with, we're using this inside of our classes to further give more color to what's going on. And this is a neural network analysis where we're looking at the relative nodes of interaction between each and every student to optimize how we design the interactive experiences within a classroom. Then, this is my baby. We're using latent semantic analysis. We're using Dirichlet analysis, which developed out of the field of fluid dynamics, and applying it to content rendering. We're taking it and breaking everything down into the most granular level. The LSA algorithms that we're using don't just look at the keywords and metadata, they look at the associative patterns between word structures that exist within natural language. And we also take video and do video to text analysis, or video to text analysis, and then go through and decipher the entire transcript to see what's in there. We used this most recently in our business program. In 2009 was our first trial of it. We were up for accreditation by the ABCS, I always mess that up. It's the accrediting agency that accredits MBA programs. Separately from our regional accreditation, we took every single piece of content that existed within all the business programs within our college, had the engine digest them, and it sorted every single piece of content into pre-ordered ontologies against goals and objectives, and drew relative concept maps to make sure that all the content and activities were matching the goals and objectives for the entire course. And you'll see in red, that was an unfulfilled objective, and it gave us an exact drill down point to go back and say we need to modify against this with either an activity or a piece of content. And the really cool thing about this is that I'm playing with now is that not only can it do this with the content, but we're working on ingesting the student output. And when the student output comes back into the model, then it's correlating using LSA. It's correlating what the student has done back to the goals and objectives for the course and the content. Oh, and by the way, the really cool part about it is that if you have two students, not even if they're in the same course, but within the same university or same ecosystem, who are working on a similar topic, even though it might be in completely different fields, the engine is smart enough to say, you two are working on the same thing. It'll send them an automated email saying you may want to collaborate. This is, now here's the dark side of the dream. This is a report, and again, this is unintelligible, and actually it's not unintelligible enough, so I'm going to skip by it and explain what was there. What you saw is a factor that we do on every single faculty member using everything you just saw with all the analysis showing how each and every faculty member is either positive or negative in the way they're fulfilling the goals and objectives and learning outcomes, both in terms of performance and content development and activity development for each and every course. That's ran 4 times a year. That takes a lot of horsepower, so we don't run it any more than that yet. It's actually, for any of you real seriously geeky people out there, that program takes 5 Tomcats stood up running for 24 hours to run it. That's a lot of horses churning. It also, the other dark side of it, and I'm running near my time, so the other dark side of it is too, that while we can predict interventions that need to be done with students, you also face a very uncomfortable question. There are some factors that we look at that say, yes, we can help this student, but based on what we know about the interventions, it's probably going to cost us about $5,000 to save that student. We have to make the decision that to save that one student, we can't afford $5,000. The resources are limited. So do you serve the one student, or do you serve the ones with the resources that you have that's going to do the most good? That's the dark side of the analytics dream that nobody's gotten to yet, but we confront it every day. So we have to let some fall through the cracks. And anybody who goes down this rabbit hole far enough is going to have to do the same thing. So that's just a word of caution. Finally, globalization. Students have to be, I was talking to a manager for Citibank on a flight. He said every student that comes in out of their MBA programs, they have to do a significant amount of retraining for because they do not understand what's going on in the world around them. So, and there's been a lot of talk here about globalization. And his point to me was, okay, because somebody is from a campus that operates in Singapore, for instance, doesn't mean they know the first thing about international relations in business or in their program. He said, what's needed, and his words struck very true, are programs that not just involve multiple universities in the same country or a university reaching out. It calls for consortia of university worldwide to start thinking about at a master's level course, where you might have 12 courses, each university putting in 2 courses to develop programs that are really meaningful and make our students very well prepared. The fact that we need to start cooperating on these kind of things is probably one of the most unsettling things that we're going to have to face in the very near future if we meet our students' expectations. Common problems across all universities. The stack of dollar bills there, wrong currency, same idea. Everything we've talked about costs a lot of money. The analytics stuff you saw, we dump about $1.5 million a year into that. But we think about for one university, what happens because the computing power does not increase, does not double for every single university that becomes involved. What happens when we start spreading out these things like analytic engines across multiple universities, program development across multiple universities? The relative cost starts to drop dramatically. We've done projections. That $1.5 million analytics implementation you saw, we've theorized that if we have 12 universities in there that are our size or even smaller, that the relative cost of that then drops down to exactly that 1.5 divided by 12. So it's not that much more work. And now all of a sudden you're starting to talk about if you have large enough consortia universities, $50,000 becomes manageable working on these implementations. Same with program development. We have 14 designers. We have some Flash people that are making $150,000 a year at our university. Not everybody can afford that, but if you start thinking about development in consortia and spreading out those resources, things like this become a lot more manageable. And I'm at 3 minutes, so I'm going to hurry through this. Why can't we get this done at universities? What's the problem? Here's our problem, one of our big problems. This is a faculty senate meeting, and I'm sure everybody in here has been involved in one of these dreaded beasts at one time, where all the faculty get together and hash out ideas. Well, the faculty senate meetings are great, but here's what happens. If a faculty senate's trying to develop one of these, they're more likely to develop one of these in the process, simply because there's so much input over so much time and not enough direction in where we're going. The attitude towards corporate. I know the part where I was talking about Adobe is probably pretty controversial, and when I said open educational resources, that somewhere, somehow, someone has to pay, a lot of people don't like that idea, but it's true. And if you want to work with these people, corporations will work with you folks, because they need our skills as much as we need them. And the other things have to do with the diffusion of technology, which I am told I am going to run out of time. So playing together, economies of scale, programs, courses of infrastructure, and you know what? There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. If we look at the California system, and I know we don't like to think of education like this, but look at the state of California. Their budgets have been cut to nothing in the U.S. right now. They have faculty who are not even reporting in one day a week to save money. There are schools closing, and yet we have for-profits that are doing double-digit growth. You know, I'm not ashamed to say it. Our university, even with the recession, we're doing 25% annualized growth on 80,000 students. And it's because we have rethought how to deliver. So working together in consortia leverages the power of being able to do these things. And I will leave you with one final thing to think about before I take questions. 1993, Peter Drucker said, the greatest change and the one we're least prepared for is that the school will have to commit to results. And the results mean taking the kind of things I've been talking about and applying them. And if we don't apply them together, the old saying goes, we can either hang together or hang separately.